Dear colleagues, let me present the report Adapting Engineering Education to Challenges of Sustainable Development. The authors of the research are Derkach and Shuhailo, representatives of Kyiv National University of Technologies and Design. The global fashion industry annually produces 4% of the world's waste. As clothing is a very symbolic product, consumers want to buy clothing as often as possible. In developed countries, each consumer annually throws away up to 30 kilograms of used textiles. The waste recycling became an acute problem for the textile industry. Students majoring in textile technologies and design lack for skills needed for processing textile waste and producing textile products using secondary raw materials. The research aims to study the existing problems that hinder the formation of the necessary competencies of future technologists and designers of the clothing industry. A survey of students of the fashion industry and designing was conducted to determine personal motives and various aspects of attitudes towards processing waste and raw materials. 93 students of bachelor's and master's degree took part in it. The materials used in the survey were developed according to the principles of the combined theory of interpersonal behavior and the theory of planned behavior. It was developed in the works of Kun Sung. This model was used to study the behavior of people in the United Kingdom who are actively involved in upcycling. The model illustrates the influence of 9 factors on upcycling behavior. The role of each factor is estimated based on the answer to different number of questions shown as items in the scheme. In total, the questionnaire contained 62 questions on 9 individual influencing factors. A 7-point Likert scale was used to quantify the responses. Upcycling behavior was assessed by its frequency. The results were analyzed using this PSS program. Correlation analysis methods were used to analyze the presence or absence of correlations between individual factors. As a preliminary step, the consistency of the survey questions and accordingly the reliability of survey results were investigated by the Cronbach's alpha test. Cronbach's alpha measures internal consistency between separate questions concerning the same factor. The results are shown in the table on the slide. For the factor of subjective norms, Cronbach's alpha value is close to 0.64. For all other factors, Cronbach's alpha exceeds the value of 0.8. This figure gives the general impression of the obtained results. It illustrates the average scores for each factor. They are obtained by summing all the answers to all questions and calculating the arithmetic mean. Only 3 factors, namely attitude, intention, and perceived behavior control, confidently confirm the positive attitude of the respondents. In the case of factor attitude, the average score of the respondents roughly corresponds to the answer agree, or about 6.05 points. The average score is close to somewhat agree, or 4.89 points for the intention factor. The average answer is intermediate for the perceived behavior control factor, namely 5.59 points. As was mentioned above, Spearman's rank order correlation was calculated to study correlations between rank values. The highest level of correlation exists between all items of the intention factor and upcycling behavior. The correlation shows a very high significance level and can be attributed to the average strengths of correlations when the coefficient vary between 0.39 and 0.45. The opposite picture is observed in case of facilitation conditions when significant correlations are completely absent. The correlations between perceived habits and upcycling behavior is not evident. According to the previous slide, the most critical factor is the factor of intention. It is formed under the influence of factors attitude and perceived behavioral control and 3 social factors. The results of calculations of correlation coefficients between individual and average values are given on this slide. For such factors as attitude and perceived behavior control. On the next slide, so the slide number 8, for 3 social factors. According to the results, significant correlations are present in all 5 pairs of factors. Moreover, the significance level of correlations between the average values in all cases exceeds 99%. The strength of the correlation consistently exceeds the value of more than 0.4. The average correlation coefficient for intention and perceived behavior control reaches 0.7. Thus, the factor of intention formation depends on all 5 factors. Surveys indicate the presence of 2 modes in the behavior of respondents regarding the frequency of use of upcycling and recycling techniques. These modes divided the respondents almost in half. This distribution is a reasonably stable value that does not depend on external parameters, such as specialty, year of study, gender, etc. It is possible to assume that students at the beginning of their studies have permanent positive or negative attitude toward recycling and upcycling. These attitudes do not change during the learning process. As shown in the figure, about half of the students practice upcycling once a year or less. That is, they do not really have a permanent habit. The other half does it once a quarter or more often. At the same time, the nature of the identified bimodality is not entirely clear. Bimodality is typical for upcycling behavior, but is not observed for other factors illustrated in the figure. For most factors, there are no signs of bimodal behavior. Some symptoms of such behavior can be attributed to factors of role beliefs, perceived benefits, and partially facilitation conditions. In some cases, the distributions tend to gradually increase from left to right, indicating that a favorable opinion of the factor impact prevails over the negative one. Other curves demonstrate close to the normal curves. However, the main practical conclusion is that the data obtained still do not provide sufficient grounds to identify the most influential factors that shape the respondents' behavior concerning recycling techniques. The obtained results indicate a positive student's attitude towards upcycling practices. However, this positive attitude does not seem conscious and perhaps reflects general fashion trends rather than a mindful attitude. The lack of correlations with perceived benefits and evident skepticism about positive benefits from upcycling activities are important. Then it is not easy to expect the future teachers and engineers in the clothing industry will consciously use environmental standards in their professional work. On this slide is presented a diagram. The double arrow in the diagram illustrates correlations of the highest degree at 99%. Single arrow slightly weaker but significant correlation 95%. The dotted line in the arrow indicates no significant correlation. Upcycling behavior is a complex function of many factors. Models and corresponding logistic regressions were built to identify the most critical items. Questions with the highest correlation coefficients were used as determinants in correlation analysis. All answers on a 7-point scale were recoded into binary nominal data for logistic regression. Upcycling behavior indicators were also translated into a binary system. Logistic regressions were constructed for 3 different models, as seen on the scheme. The factor intention is a dependent variable in the first regression model. Factors attitude, subjective norms, personal norms, role beliefs, and perceived behavior control are influencing factors. This model explained the intentions behavior and contained 10 items with the highest correlation coefficients among the 5 factors mentioned above as independent variables. The model is statistically significant, and it can distinguish between respondents who intend and do not practice upcycling. The model correctly classifies 84.2% of cases. One item to the factor perceived behavior control, upcycling things would be easy for me, has the largest contribution to the model. Respondent who said upcycling things would be easy for me intend to apply upcycling 9.5 times more often than those who disagree with this statement. Another influential item is upcycling fits my role in my family. The second model focuses on the study of upcycling behavior. 3 items of intention factors and perceived habits served as determinants. The model is statistically significant. It differentiates the respondents with frequent and rare upcycling practices. The model correctly classifies 67% of the variances. The third item belonging to the factor intention, I intend to upcycle things, produces the most significant impact. People who responded positively to this item were 4.5 times more likely to apply upcycling often. Model 2 is inferior to model first and third in predictive power, explaining only 67% of the sample. The third model studies factors' effect on upcycling behavior. It is also statistically significant. It differentiates respondents with rare and regular upcycling practices. The model correctly classifies 76.6% of variances. The most influential item, upcycling things would be easy for me, and I intend to upcycle things, belong to factors perceived behavior control and intentions respectively. People who responded positively to the above items in 4.3 and 3.5 times more often apply upcycling frequently. Summaries. The vast majority of students declare a positive attitude towards recycling and upcycling technologies. However, this attitude is more theoretical and is often not supported by appropriate actions. Second, almost all students do not understand the benefits that can be proved by careful waste management, neither economic nor environmental, nor the benefits at the level of consciousness. The third, attitudes towards waste disposal or use upcycling practices remain almost unchanged through the years of study. Therefore, training in existing curricula does not increase interest in the problem of waste recycling. The fourth, the distribution of students according to the frequency of application of upcycling techniques is bimodal. All respondents are roughly divided in those who practice them regularly and those who use them sporadically. The fifth one, the factor of intentions is most influential with respect to upcycling behavior, which in turn is formed under the influence of attitude factors, three social factors, and perceived behavioral control. The sixth one, the construction of logistic regressions allows identifying the most critical questions in the questionnaire. The answers to them allow predicting the intentions of upcycling and the frequency of upcycling for 70–80% of the sample. Only 3 items were among the most influential. Upcycling things would be easy for me, I intend to upcycle things, and upcycling fits my role in my family. Thank you for attention.